U.S. President Donald Trump completely blindsided his top national security advisors when he announced yesterday the pullout of troops from Syria, saying the U.S. has defeated ISIS in what's being seen as his own version of a mission accomplished statement. What makes the whole thing even more baffling is the fact that the U.S. envoy for the global coalition to defeat the Islamic State, Brett McGurk, said last week the exact opposite.
Even as the end of the physical caliphate is clearly now coming into sight, the end of ISIS will be a much more long-term initiative. We talked about that many times. Nobody working on these issues day to day is complacent. Nobody is declaring a mission accomplished. Defeating the physical caliphate is one phase of a much longer-term campaign.
And today, the president tweeted, "Does the USA want to be the policeman of the Middle East, getting nothing but spending precious lives and trillions of dollars protecting others who, in almost all cases, do not appreciate what we are doing? Do we want to be there forever? Time for others to finally fight." So, who's right and who wins and loses from this decision? Happy to be joined by Jim Antle, the editor at the American Conservative Magazine, and Antoine Seawright, founder and CEO of Blueprint Strategy. Thanks for coming on the show, guys. It's great to see you. Jim, I want to start with you. How do you see this surprise move and the fact that it totally is the opposite of what Brett McGurk said exactly a week ago?
I don't think it's really that much of a surprise. I think what we've seen is that the president's national security team is largely a bunch of establishment types and neocons who don't really share the foreign policy that President Trump campaigned on. He campaigned on the idea that our interventions in the Middle East were largely disastrous and haven't yielded the results that were promised to us when we got into these wars under presidents of both parties. And he promised to make a change. And we haven't really seen that change, in large part because he has so many advisors and staffers who are committed to the bipartisan Beltway viewpoint on this, and they've been slow-walking him. And I think over the course of the last week, the president has finally had enough, and he is the person who was elected, not all of these bureaucrats and advisors. They're there to advise and serve him, not the other way around. And you can raise some questions about the process, but I think when we look at the mission creep that's going on over in Syria, I think that this is the right move.
Okay, Antoine, what's your response to that? What do you make of him going against his own national security staff?
Unfortunately, this is par for the course for this president. I mean, this is what happened when you put an inexperienced driver at the wheel to drive the car. What I would say to my friend on the opposite political side of the aisle of me is that if this were Barack Hussein Obama, you and many others in the right-wing media would be going off the wires about this situation. Here's what I say as it relates to national security.
You might
when you have a president who came into this office, here's what happens when you have a president a person who comes into this office with zero experience on the job, particularly as it relates to foreign policy. It is a custom, or it is important that he lean on people who do this stuff for a living and who, from an institutional standpoint, the United States of America they have depended on for a very long time to give guidance and direction. I don't go to my dentist's office and tell my dentist what to do with my mouth because I'm not a dentist for a living. I think the president should adopt those same principles. The good news about this is we see bipartisan outrage about this from the left and the right, and I think this is one of the rare moments where the legislative branch has to step up and put in a system of checks and balances.
Jim, it looks like you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I supported getting out of Iraq. It's total nonsense that I didn't. I didn't want to go into Iraq in the first place. But here's where the experience comes into play. We have over 15 years of experience intervening in the Middle East. We can never get out of any of these countries, and we don't have any success on the horizon. There's no success in sight. Iraq was a total disaster and a failure. We've been in Afghanistan longer than we fought World War II. We're only prolonging civil war in Syria and leading to more cost of human life.
Jim,
if we can't extricate ourselves with 2,000 troops in Syria, where can we get out of some of these places?
Jim, I got to ask you this quickly because, you know, there are quite a few Israelis here that think that this move opens the door completely for Iran to enter Syria more aggressively. So if the U.S. is concerned
not to
about
mention
Israeli
Putin was praising this move.
Yeah, that's correct. But I want to ask Jim this. If the U.S. is concerned about Israeli security, why would he do this?
We're concerned about Israeli security?
Yeah, I mean, there are Israelis that are saying that he abandoned Israel.
Have really, in no way we. First of all, that's a ridiculous argument that we were abandoning Israel by doing this. There are 2,000 troops and there are 2,000 military advisors. If they're really the only bulwark against counterbalance to Iran, which frankly our war in Iraq is the main thing that's empowered Iran in that region, then Israel and the United States are in real trouble. This is a very cosmetic intervention that's really only prolonging a lot of fighting and human suffering in the region. We've lost our reason to be there. Are we really going to war to establish a Kurdish state within there? I don't think we should, and I think the president's right on this.
Antoine, what's your response to that? And what would you tell people here that in Israel are very, very concerned about Trump's decision?
Well, I think rightly so, and I think people, those of us who know that Trump is only for a certain time period and his clock will eventually expire, should be concerned, because if we lose ground in a place where we've gained some ground over time, the process to gain that ground back the load is going to be even heavier to carry. And that's the point I think you see from the left and the right, particularly those in the legislative branch. And to my point I was trying to make earlier, look, anytime you see Vladimir Putin praising a move as relates to national security in the United States, I think we all should have reason to be concerned. And it's no secret that we had Republican Marco Rubio highlighting this point on Twitter yesterday. Some Russian Twitter account talked about how great the move was, and that should be alarming and concerning for all of us. At the end of the day, this president beats his drum about putting America first and doing what's in the best interest of Americans. Well, I look at our intelligence community, I look at our generals, those around him who do this stuff for a living, and if they say it's not a good idea, then I think the leader of the free world should lean on their advice.
Okay, you mentioned Marco Rubio. Let's listen to what some people on Capitol Hill are saying about the decision. It didn't really go down well.
I believe it is a catastrophic mistake that will have grave consequences for the United States, for our interests, and for our allies in the months and years to come.
The president's decision, which was announced via a tweet, is dangerous, premature, and wholly inconsistent with the facts on the ground in Syria and our own military's advice.
And I just got back from Afghanistan, haven't slept in 2 days, really appreciate the chance to go visit our troops and talk to our generals, but there's sure as hell ISIS-K is not defeated in Afghanistan.
Was this decision made with the advice of the military or counter to the advice of the military? That's the first question that I want to know.
So as I said, a lot of people apparently think this is a bad idea, including, for example, former ambassador to Israel, Dan Shapiro, who said, to sum up, Trump defies his entire national security team, goes against the wishes of key allies, and weakens the pressure campaign against Iran, but he delivers big time for his autocratic friends, Putin and Erdogan. Jim, could the backlash that we just saw from a lot of politicians from inside the GOP, could it change this?
I doubt it. You never know. President Trump can be a bit erratic, but these are Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio and Hillary Clinton have never seen a war that they didn't like. And so it's not terribly surprising that they're critical of this move. Where were all of these members of Congress when it came time to vote to authorize doing this in the first place? None of them want to be doing their constitutional duty on that front and being involved when it comes to actually authorizing the use of military force. None of them want to take hard votes on that. None of them were willing to take those votes in 2013 when President Obama wanted to go into Syria several years ago. But now when the president wants to use presidential authority to get out, now they all have something to say. When did they have something to say about this policy when we got in there in the first place, which was as impulsive and as erratic as any move to get out?